What is your reaction to the events that have taken place since the stabbings a week or so ago in Southport?
Well, as I've said a number of times over the last couple of days, the things that we have seen are completely unjustified. These are the actions of people who are clearly responding to disinformation online, but are obviously motivated by racism. We've seen people with swastika tattoos and giving the Nazi salute, attacking people that have had, of course, no link at all with the terrible incidents that we saw in Southport last week. And it is absolutely right that the government is saying that they will take firm action. They should and could have been quicker. I think it's worrying that it's only today that COBRA is going to meet. It was only yesterday afternoon that we found out the Prime Minister was going to cancel his holiday. So we want to support the government in taking firm action against this violence and disorder, but they have to move much more quickly. They have to be more agile, more decisive.
I'll come to that in just a moment, but let's just quickly check exactly how you'd frame the events. The Prime Minister said it's not protest, and he said it was far-right thuggery. Do you agree with the Prime Minister's words on that?
Well, it's self-evidently, it is as I say, when you've got people giving Nazi salutes with swastika tattoos, that is clearly far-right extremism. It's something that I was briefed on regularly when I was Home Secretary, and something I was very aware of in terms of the use of social media to organise, disseminate disinformation, to breed hatred. So I was very, very conscious of the risk of this when I was Home Secretary, and we're seeing, unfortunately, this now playing out. And it's clearly these attacks on mosques, on hotels, these are clearly driven by racism and should be condemned unequivocally right across the board.
You suggested in your first answer that the government hasn't done enough soon enough. I think it's fair to frame what you were saying. What precisely could they have done in the first week? I mean, there's been over 400 arrests. The Home Secretary, the Prime Minister have very clearly given the police all the backing they need in the short term. You can't preempt events, can you?
So we've seen nearly a week of disorder now, and COBRA is only going to meet later on today. There are key decisions that need to be made very early in the process. Had I still been Home Secretary, I would have called a COBRA meeting much earlier than this. We need certainty, the police need certainty over things like overtime funding, about the nature of mutual aid. Traditionally, police mutual aid has gravitated towards London, which is where usually we have protests and, unfortunately, a disorder. But we're now seeing the need for police mutual aid across a number of points of the country simultaneously. So what are the operational, organisational decisions around that? What is the funding around that? What is going to be the sign-off process for that? There are a whole load of things which the decisions that need to be made early rather than late, so the police have certainty, so the public have confidence, and so it is not just about the statements. When you're in opposition, you have to think about what you're going to say. When you're in government, you have to think about what you're going to do. And those decisions, those operational decisions from government should be made much earlier in this process.
I guess, I mean, to hold you on to that statement, are you suggesting that had you been Home Secretary, we've had a week of these events, could you have prevented what's happened in the last 2 days of that week, over the weekend? Would those riots on days 5, 6 and 7 not have happened? I'm just trying to gauge how you would have handled this differently, what effect would have been different.
The point I'm making is we're now almost a week into this violence and disorder. COBRA should have met. COBRA is the primary vehicle for cross-government coordination liaison. So the local government department, the intelligence services, the security services, the Home Office, all these government departments need to come together with senior police officers in a decision-making forum where formal decisions can be made about things like mutual aid, about things like funding, about things like additional powers. This should have happened earlier. Now, I am no longer privy to the kind of information that I was able to see when I was Home Secretary, so I'm not able to comment on that. But what I do know is that when the public are worried, and they are, when the police need clarity and certainty, as they do, decisions, the kind of decisions you can only credibly make in something like COBRA should happen much earlier on in the process. We will give the government its full support to crack down on this violence. But as I'm saying, if I were Home Secretary, COBRA would have met much earlier than today.
The other question I wanted to explore to you is, why do you think this is all happening now? As you said, as Home Secretary, you were privy to much more information than the rest of us, including on things that maybe very nearly happened a number of times but didn't quite. Do you think the nation has been close to bubbling over in this way, or pockets of the nation?
So I'm really uncomfortable with the idea that somehow this violence reflects a wider national mood. This is a group of extreme people, people committing arson, people attacking mosques, people targeting asylum hotels. They are not reflective of the country. This is a generous and open-hearted country. They are the people of this country are not represented by the thugs that are attacking people, committing arson, and targeting places of worship. So I think that's very, very important distinction to make. And look, and I remember through my childhood, National Front marching through Lewisham, where I lived when I was a kid, when I was first elected onto the Greater London Assembly. There was an elected member of the BNP who sat next to me at the London Assembly, because I was the only person willing to sit next to them, because I didn't want to demonstrate any fear or intimidation. So the point is, we know there have always been small pockets of this, but we also have to make sure that we recognise they are not reflective of the wider society, and we shouldn't allow the narrative to imply that they are.
Why have these protests erupted in the last week? Clearly, Southport and the awful stabbing incident there was a catalyst, but there have been some awful stabbing incidents in recent years. Why do you think things have bubbled over in this pocket, as you're framing it, recently?
Well, I was well aware of a very pernicious online culture perpetrated by the far right, amplified both within the UK and beyond our borders. This has got all the hallmarks of something which has been stoked by that. When I was Home Secretary, I went to the United States of America, both on the West Coast, to talk to the tech firms, and in New York to talk to the tech firms there, to discuss clearly their responsibilities to prevent misinformation and disinformation. It is something that is, I think, an amplifier in these circumstances. And we need to recognise that the violence that we see on our streets and the toxic narrative that's being perpetrated online are interwoven. The Home Secretary needs to take ownership of this. My understanding is that the relationship with the tech firms has now been given across to the Culture Secretary. This is too important for that. I led on this when I was Home Secretary, and I think Yvette should continue to do so.
On Saturday, Nigel Farage retweeted a tweet from Zia Youssef, the chair of the Reform Party, saying this, quote, "Nobody's done more to sow division among the British people than race-obsessed Labour." Do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, I think that I've been critical of the Labour Party and some of the postures they're taking. I don't think it is appropriate or healthy, particularly at times like this, to add to toxicity and friction. As I say, I want the government to succeed. I want the government to succeed in calming this situation, in bringing people away from violence, in making sure those who have perpetrated violence are brought to justice. I want the government to succeed. That is my priority. There will be a time when we need to have a broader, calmer assessment of what has happened and why, including the role of online disinformation, including the role of agents provocateurs within the far right, stirring people up and encouraging them to take these kind of violence. But language like that I don't think is useful. What we need to do now is concentrate exclusively on making sure this action stops.
Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly, thanks so much. Great to see you.